Bitcoin has hit a new all-time high. Of course, we're going to be breaking this down for you guys and tell you what's going to happen in the markets in the coming days. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Let's get going. I do want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Tangem. This is a place for you guys to get into self-custody. And self-custody, if you've never done this before and you're getting into crypto for the first time, this is where you can actually move your tokens from exchanges. When you hear about people moving off exchanges, this is what they're doing. They're going into self-custody to control that for safety. It is a great way to do it. Just visit tangem.com. You guys can get in there and get your secure wallet, and it's very easy to set up. So even if you're brand new, you will find this wallet to be one of the easiest to use. Use our link down below, get some additional discount, and get started on your self-custody journey. I want to bring in, of course, Mr. Tim Warren, coming in from Investing Bros. How are you?
Doing good, Paul. It's hard to complain on a day where Bitcoin hits new all-time highs, you know?
Tell me about it. By the way, if you guys are not over on Investing Bros right now on YouTube, this, of course, is Tim's channel. He does a great job at breaking down a lot of what the market is doing. And right there it is. I know you guys did a live stream on, did you have a live stream this morning? Yeah, well, 150 next. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
We normally don't go live until 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but today I was like, we actually started setting it all up before we hit all-time high. We're like, let's try to be live while we're all, and then of course, as we're saying on the stream, it hits all-time high. I was like, well, we'll celebrate, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I tweeted this today, and this was kind of in alignment with what I think is happening in the market. I've got some Wall Street sources out there that we talk with quite a bit, especially around the Bitcoin ETF. And the sentiment from last night, we had kind of a little powwow discussion, and they were talking that the demand and the appetite right now for institutional capital on these Bitcoin ETFs is skyrocketing, and it's possibly even more than we can be expecting. So that's the real question. Over 329 million in inflow to spot Bitcoin ETFs on Tuesday. This is the 5th straight day of inflows right now. BlackRock obviously leading the space on IBIT at 287. Fidelity came in number 2 at 23. But, you know, and then we get the next morning, Bitcoin smashing through its all-time high. So you look at the demand, you look at the global, we've got a couple of clips to play here, Tim, but what do you think on the chart when you look at the chart for Bitcoin's health right now?
Yeah, Paul, I'll be honest with you. If you had asked me last week, said, Tim, next week for all-time high, I would have said maybe, but probably not. You know, we have been overextended on Bitcoin. I can show right now, I know we're going to show some clips here, but we have been hit the button twice, overextended on Bitcoin all the way back here. We should have corrected back early in May. Not anything major. I don't think this was, I always told people, don't sell in May and walk away. I think May is going to be a big month. I just thought we were going to correct back down towards 89,000 first. We ignored it, right? Bearish indicators told us we had sell signals coming in. We were overextended, bearish divergence. We're good to go. Then we put in a new high, getting back above 100,000. Said, oh, this is great. All right, but it's time to pull back. We even set up here over the last couple of days, we set up a bearish formation called a rising channel. Ask any technical analyst, anyone who knows the charts, 7 out of 10 times at least, if not closer to 8 or 9, these break to the downside. But today, the bulls woke up and chose violence, and not just breaking a resistance. They've now given us a new all-time high for the first time in several months, shutting the mouths of all those bears. I mean, where are the bears today that were saying we weren't ever going to see a new all-time high ever again? Bitcoin's going to 3,000. I don't think they're tweeting that much today.
No.
And it's going to be crazy, Paul, because we'll probably go back to the charts. I'll show you where the charts are saying correct again.
Yes.
I'll show you the indicators to say we should go back down. The money flow right now, and I like what you just brought up in that tweet, that the institutions that are coming in and going crazy bullish. This is something, as a technical analyst, I probably should stick to just the charts, but I've been telling people this bull market is going to be different. Last bull market, the institutions manipulated the markets to suppress the price. This market, watch the chart, sometimes not get it right because they can't even compute how bullish these institutional big money buyers are. And I think that's what we're seeing happen right now.
I always worry about price manipulation because that's, you know, obvious, you know, functions that we see when big money gets involved in capital markets like what we have right now with Bitcoin. And you think about that and where the Bitcoin market is going, but also the other factor is, and I'll show you in a minute, is that there's a lot still looming of retail because retail hasn't necessarily engaged just yet. And I think that's the question I have to you. When you look at the chart, the way Bitcoin is lining up right now, Has there been any other historical events in Bitcoin charts that have similarities to what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything that I'm finding is identical. A question I would have is, are we going to potentially see a repeat of maybe what just happened, or not I say just, what happened way back in 2020, at the very end of 2020? Those of you who have been invested that long, remember we were approaching 20,000 again, former all-time highs. Yes, we had a little bit of a correction right there. Nothing major, just a little bounce. And then when we shot through new all-time highs, we just took off. I'll show the charts on that one if you scroll all the way back here. So give me a second. I'm on the daily chart. There we go. Good. So we're going to go all the way back here to December of 2020. Okay. This, of course, again, we're hitting those all-time highs up towards 20,000 that were set back in December 17. We hesitated below. We didn't set a new all-time high until December 16th, give or take. But once we did, we took off like a bottle rocket, right? I remember vividly, I was newer to trading. I was newer to charts. Everyone that I was learning charts from was just dumbfounded. They said, this just doesn't make any sense. Bitcoin won't stop. Even that little hiccup that happened at the end of December, we just continued into January with parabolic moves here. That's going to be the question. Will we see a move like that? I mean, I was expecting maybe a similar move to what we saw last summer, last fall, where you did see several pullbacks towards the daily smart trail before we went parabolic. But this one, man, I mean, we're not even getting close to the daily smart trail at this point. At some point, we got to touch it. At some point, the daily smart trail will be revisited. But now, as we have set a new all-time high, are we going to kind of flounder right here, or are we going to go crazy and shoot all the way to 120 before the next reversal? Last thing I'll show here on the Bitcoin chart that we've been monitoring is the M2 global money supply. I want to change this, though, to 12 weeks instead of only 10, because a lot of times it's more like 90 days. So I want to see 3 months. If you look at this is a lag, obviously, on how the M2 money supply is moving, but it's saying, I mean, if we tuned here, the next couple of days should start the next parabolic run on Bitcoin with a lot of explosiveness. It's not 100% perfect how the M2 moves compared to Bitcoin, but it's very similar. Look at this history of this. When M2's rallying, Bitcoin's rallying. When M2's falling, Bitcoin is falling. This is saying if we stick to it, we should have another big run here in the next couple of days. Maybe it just started today.
All right, so if that is the case and you see shorts being liquidated, here was 50 million just in the past 60 minutes, that was as of this morning. I mean, is anybody looking at shorting Bitcoin? I mean, this could be the contrarian play right now, where there is so much euphoria, because that's what the market, I think, is feeling right now. CNBC is going crazy, Squawk Box is off the hook. Everybody's screaming at the top of their lungs that institutional is pulling this market forward. Do you feel like anybody would be brave enough to short Bitcoin right now?
Well, they should be. I'll be very honest. While I've been a very long-term long of Bitcoin, making a lot of money on my long from 74.4, I've been hedging at times. I have a couple wins with my hedging bets. I have a couple losses. The last 3 days, I have 3 losses trying to short this Bitcoin market. The charts are there. The charts are saying to pull back. So this is a liquidation chart on the screen. And this was the last pile. I thought we were going to teeter into it, touch it here on 107 and come back down. That's why I said a short there. Didn't work out. But you can see the last layer of it is coming up here right around 110. After that, we go into full-blown price discovery mode. Anything after that, I mean, if I went to a 15-minute chart, you're going to find some liquidations above us. But all these liquidations are from short positions that have just been entered within the last hour and a half. So we've hit everything major we've been looking at for months now. Now it becomes a question, does the bullish momentum continue, or is this the perfect excuse now that we touched new all-time high? Is this finally the time after about 3 weeks of needing to pull back? Is this finally the excuse? I told people in my live stream I did earlier, if you're an experienced trader, there are so many arguments right now to enter a short position on Bitcoin. If you're not, though, sit back, drink the Kool-Aid, watch the charts, watch shows like Paul Barron Network, because you want to stay updated on everything happening, but maybe just hodl. It's going to be a fun summer. Just hodl on.
Yeah, and you look at Bitcoin right now surpassing Amazon as the 5th largest asset in the world by market cap. So kudos to the big orange bee. I think we are in a position right now that really starts to maybe bring in a little bit of the market coming from other categories. One of them, of course, is gold. You look at this, 50 million Americans right now own Bitcoin, in contrast to 36.7 Americans owning gold. Now, that to me is a surprising stat. And you look, because the amount, so clearly that means that there's just the depth of people owning gold, a lot more of it. My question is, does this start to push the needle forward on retail, basically looking at Bitcoin as my alternative asset? Meaning, instead of buying Microsoft and Amazon like I was a decade ago, I'm just going to start pouring every extra dollar I can into Bitcoin. What do you think the retail environment is right now?
Yeah, I would be lying to say I haven't been reached out to by a couple of my friends and family members who have not invested yet, asking me where to go. That's another reason why I think a correction should be coming here soon, because anytime a brand new anytime the noobs, quote unquote, start asking about it, that's when you think something's happening. But yeah, I think when you look at a lot of different indicators, the retail, it's here. It's not that retailers aren't present, but I think it's a lot more experienced, older holders, not necessarily a lot of new retail investors, which is why I don't think the bull market top is in. I also, again, looking at that number, which again, I'm seeing now for the first time, that there's more Americans own Bitcoin than gold. I would say, though, if you were to dive into that, Paul, more than likely what you're seeing is, of those 50 million Americans holding Bitcoin, the majority of us are probably not multi-millionaires, versus I bet you have a lot more millionaires owning gold. Here's going to be the question. Gold's not going to plummet. I don't want anyone to think that I'm like a gold bear. I'm not the anti-Peter Schiff, but how long before some of those gold bugs wake up and say, you know what, gold's awesome, but gold only keeps me where I'm at pretty much.
Right.
If I want to turn this into more, I can change a lot right now. Let me go buy this hot asset over here, Bitcoin. Let me buy the dips whenever those cool-offs do happen. Maybe watch that transition of millionaires in America switch over into Bitcoin holders. They'll keep both, proper diversification, but it's so hard to argue that Bitcoin isn't the newest, hottest thing. And everyone's talking about it at this point.
Yeah, well, I think the point is to your exact issue right there, is that maybe there is a psychological shift that's occurring right now on long-term investors that have large liquidity pools available to them. And part of that is resident in the sense that we are seeing the kind of ETF runs that we are right now. I want to go to a clip by Novogratz. He talks about this very point. Take a look.
But really, it was the change of the shift of approach from the Gary Gensler SEC to this Trump administration, which has just embraced our industry. And that freed up the animal spirits, both here and abroad. Right? I've had conversations with heads of large sovereign wealth funds that said, if America's buying Bitcoin, we're buying Bitcoin. And so you're seeing like the snowball is rolling downhill. The one thing that could have held it back some, at least the Bitcoin price, would have been if, Scott Bessent and his team and Congress could have really knocked that deficit from 7% of GDP down towards 3%, which was his plan. Right now, it looks like it's going from 7 to 8. And, I like Scott Bessent a lot. I think he's as competent and capable as anybody. We're in a really hard position as a country. And when you have this kind of debt, and you're seeing it with long ends of interest, yield curves are selling off everywhere. The dollar's under pressure, and that all is very good for Bitcoin and crypto assets as well.
So, he hit on a couple of points there. One, I think directly at Scott Bessent in the sense of really trying to get the deficit down, because that would, in certain areas, weaken the dollar. If we get a weaker dollar, typically we see Bitcoin and alternative assets move. Right now, the dollar is stronger and rebounding a little bit if you compare that on the Dixie. Why do you think we are seeing potentially a strong dollar and Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs, especially with pressure on U.S. Treasuries?
Yeah, well, it looks like the Dixie is falling a little bit here today when I look at the chart. When you look at the 1 hour chart again, so if you go back to a couple days ago, a week ago or so, we're falling here on the Dixie, right? So the dollar is losing value here. But, it did rebound. I want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly, because, again, it had a nice little dead cat bounce here, but the dollar's been falling here on the Dixie since back in January. Had a nice little rebound. For the most part, it was almost like keeping in touch with what Bitcoin was doing. But I love what he said. He's like, at the end of the day, the dollar going downhill is good for Bitcoin. Let's
Yeah.
say the dollar goes up and liquidity comes back. That's good for Bitcoin. Why? Because
Yep,
people
yep.
are waking up and saying, whether it happens today or next year or 10 years from now, the dollar's dying, fiat is dying, crypto is here, and it's time to invest.
Well, and I think to your point, where I believe you're talking about the Japanese yen in terms of U.S.
I said
Treasury
yuan, I meant
comparison.
yen. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with the yen, because this is something that does affect the United States in a big way, because they're the largest holder of U.S. Treasuries, and if we do see a pressure on U.S. Treasuries of them selling to obviously compensate for what's happening with the yen, that could also benefit the dollar going down. But this will get into a play here in a second. We'll talk about in terms of stablecoins, because this may replace, and this may be the alpha hack that everybody's waiting for. I'll share that with you guys in a second. But I want to go to a tweet here by Matt Siegel. Matt says, Bitcoin now 1K. This was right before it hit all-time high. But yet the Google Trends chart looks like this, basically flat, if not down.
Yeah.
You know, this is Bitcoin, people searching for Bitcoin. So clearly, retail has not necessarily come in just yet. And not that they will, because it's very possible that we could see FOMO hitting not at the retail level first, but actually at the global macro level on large investment, much like what we were talking about earlier. Let me play a clip for you on this very point and see what you think. Take a look.
Well, the word is FOMO, because a lot of investors just haven't participated. We've had this 20% advance off of the lows. They haven't believed it. We've gapped above the 20-period moving average, the 50-day moving average, and the 200-day moving average. And they still look at this market and say, how do I get on board with this? When, again, the market's going up. It's creating a lot of challenges for investors, because when you look at the positioning data, they're just not there.
All right, so this is being the traditional S&P. Markets moving up in alignment with what's happening around the Trump plan so far. A lot of correlation to the political timeline that's been happening in the Middle East, most likely with a war being settled, and now with the restructuring and possibly a reset with China. All of this layering into what we could see, back to your point earlier, Tim, more money flow in the M2 coming in from profits. And if that happens, usually that's slipping into decent or at least diversified assets such as Bitcoin and altcoins. Do you think that's going to have a huge play of taking Bitcoin maybe to a parabolic run here?
You're talking about the slipping of fiat in general, or the M2 supply?
The M2 supply being ejected or increased because of what we're seeing in terms of the gains on the S&P, mainly the traditional finance sector. Them taking profits. You know, people are going to say, well, I'm going to pull some profits out of traditional finance, look at some alternatives out here that may have a harder run. Is Bitcoin one of those?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Anytime you're going to look at different asset classes and say this one's overbought, this one's oversold, people want to buy oversold. Or smart money, which is the big money, which is the money that moves markets. They want to buy oversold. What I think, you know, there's a lot of things you could go into on that one. What I would even say is to go a little further. How long it's going to take to finalize is going to be a big question. People are wondering, but the S&P 500 and the stock market, they're going to go the route of tokenization. What's tokenization? It's a lot of different altcoins in there. We're talking the Ethereums and the Chainlinks and the Ondos and the AVAXs. And you know, you have to have your proper layer ones, not just Ethereum. You're going to see SUI and Solana and others benefit from that world as well. The stock market could go up, and that make altcoins go up even higher, because again, they're going to start building on these altcoins.
Bingo.
So again, I like the expression. I'm a Virginia Tech fan. For anyone who's in America who knows college football, I'm a Virginia Tech fan. I grew up with a cup. My dad had this cup that said, "All dirt roads lead to Blacksburg." We love that expression. I've been using that. I've been taking it and doing it in crypto. All dirt roads lead towards Bitcoin and these top altcoins going parabolic in the next 5 years, if not the next year and a half. Why? Because, hey, is the economy doing well? Invest in the future. Invest in this cryptocurrency. Is everything not going well? Oh, fiat currency is terrible. We got to get a new technology. We got to get into Bitcoin. We got to get into these altcoins. We got to tokenize everything and make it more streamlined. All dirt roads lead to altcoins rallying, to Bitcoin rallying. It's just not altcoin season yet. It's Bitcoin season. But I'm still optimistic. Later this summer or fall, alts are going to go parabolic, with or without the S&P 500 going up or down.
Yeah. Well, don't spoil it because we're going to get into some altcoins here in a little bit. But I do want to ask you about what Arthur Hayes said. And here's Arthur Hayes. He's warning mainly of a harsh Bitcoin correction. So he's kind of on your camp in the sense that, hey, it's due. But at the same time, he's pointing out toward around 150 as the mark, that we could literally see a 150K Bitcoin and then a harsh correction, whether that is back down to 120 or 100. What do you believe, if we did see a 150 Bitcoin, how would you play that out for a correction? Would you buy on the way down? What would be the strategy for you?
Yeah, I mean, so what we've seen happen so far this year, we just got a 33% correction. We've seen several 20% corrections. I would say 150,000 would make sense to go ahead and have another, let's call it a mild bear market, Paul. I mean, I wouldn't call it a full-blown bear market, but last summer 2024, that was long. And that was hard for some people. And it took out a lot of people, convinced a lot of people the bull market was over. Sure enough, in September, we rebounded. We started going. November really got the ball rolling, and we hit new all-time highs. But no, I would be all on board for, let me see what that correction would be. I'll share my screen just so people can see it as well. Let's say we got to 150, somewhere in this camp. I think 140 is going to also be an interesting zone. But let's just say 150. What would a 30% correction be? That's kind of what I would say. Expect about a 30% correction. We're looking at a pullback back down. Yeah, I mean, back down towards 100,000. Yeah. Is that doable? Yeah, it's absolutely doable. We just did it here. We did it last summer. I think that's absolutely in the cards. But here's what's going to be really fun about it is the 4-year cycle there, Paul. Everyone is convinced that the 4-year cycle is still intact. And could we see like an August, September where the 4-year cycle would have topped out? Do we see a pullback then? Another 30%? People, retail investors say, there we go. 4-year cycle hits. We're in a bear market. Sell all my Bitcoin. Well, let's remember, there's only 21 million that will ever exist. There's over 60 million millionaires, which means not even every millionaire can own one Bitcoin. And we know of several millionaires who own hundreds of thousands of them.
Yeah.
They got to have some sort of excuse to convince people like you and me, Paul, to sell our hard-earned Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Telling us that a 4-year cycle is over and you need to sell off to make money so that they can buy it up at 100,000, at 150,000. Like, that's the play there. That's the play. I think that's a good analysis, though. 150 to 100K or 100. I like 120. I think I would buy back at 120. But
all right, so that's
definitely in the cards.
Now, he goes on in the same article. He says he expects the nasty correction of what you're talking about, maybe a 30%.
Yeah.
Before Bitcoin rockets to 250 by year end. Now, Tom Lee, who has been, I would say, one of the biggest bulls out there for Bitcoin, he's been kind of pointing at the 170 mark by end of year. For Hayes to come in at 250, I still feel like that is a little strong. First of all, the psychological effect of a $200,000 Bitcoin. I don't even know what the market would look like if that occurs. Just because of the FOMO that would come in from institutions, the FOMO from retail coming in, the FOMO from nation states, and the amount of liquidity that would pour into altcoins at that point would be just mind-boggling. So it's a big number for sure. Hey, we got to jump over to the Stablecoin Bill. It looks like we are getting close. Now we are past the amendment process. And now moving in, the Senate just officially advanced the Genius Bill for consideration. So this is going to go to a vote. It is very possible, and I put out a tweet last week, and I said, and my sources were right, we are going to get a vote on a stablecoin bill this week. It looks like it's going to happen before the holiday. And if that comes through, then boom, what does that do for Ethereum when you look at ETH being one of the big winners of a stablecoin bill, along with, I think, just in general, the market? You also have Hong Kong, who passed their stablecoin bills. They're launching a licensing regime for all fiat-backed stablecoin. That's going to create maybe a gold rush, which is maybe why Circle is looking at selling. First of all, how do you think ETH will respond to this if we do get a stablecoin bill passed?
Yeah, I think the altcoin space as a whole will benefit a lot from this happening. And the simplicity of it is just another step in the right direction. I think you're right. Coins like Ethereum that actually have stablecoins built on them, there's a fundamental reason for them to go up. And we'll look at Ethereum chart here in a second. But I would take a look at the altcoin space as a whole and say regulation is going to free up a lot of these institutions that have been sitting on the sideline to say, all right, it's time to go in. There are some institutions buying right now, but I know of, I've talked to people that have talked about, 20 to 30 different large companies who have said their executive role or executive cast have said, we want to buy Bitcoin. We want to buy altcoins. Our board tells us we're not allowed to buy this risky asset until there's clear rules, regulation on the table. Stablecoin regulation is the first step. You got to regulate that first because that's where a lot of chaos can happen. Once that regulation is clear, the regulation for altcoins is not far behind. So it's a stepping stone process, but it's very good. As far as Ethereum, let's go take a look there, which, by the way, while we were talking here live, Paul, Bitcoin has pulled back here a little bit. So back down toward where are we? 107 now?
Yep.
So little correction there. Also, Ethereum fell back below 2,500. This is actually a level we talked about in our group this morning. There's some liquidations right there. That's what we just kissed right there. Some liquidations came in right here below 2,500. We kissed those. We're making a little bit of a bounce back, but we'll focus more on longer term stuff here for Ethereum. Even though Ethereum hasn't had the run today that Bitcoin has, right? Today was a Bitcoin day. Ethereum has been making a nice boost here, a big early start to May. Anyone who sold in May and walked away, I feel bad for them because you pretty much sold the bottom for Ethereum. But this is one, just like I said with Bitcoin, from a charts perspective, corrections are needed. When I take a look at the daily chart here, you can see the MACD. Oh, there we go. Earlier this morning, it hadn't crossed. It now is officially crossed. We have a bearish MACD cross on the daily chart for Ethereum. The RSI set in some bearish divergence here. It's now making a correction to the downside. Even the Luxago oscillator, my favorite buy and sell signal. I have the red reversal. I have the bearish momentum. And there's my negative money flow. The money's starting to bleed out of Ethereum. This would suggest a healthy correction for Ethereum back down here towards this red mark, at least back down towards 2,200-ish. Right, that's going to be a zone there. There's also some fair value gaps right in that area. If I can go to the 12-hour chart, we have a big bullish breaker block with a take profit signal there. So that's my buying spot for Ethereum, probably somewhere here around 2260, 2250.
Okay.
With that said, though, longer time frames, we still got a long way to go to the upside. The Luxago buy signal is telling us up back above 3,000. If I were to look at fixed range volume profile, a level that's going to be a nice kind of watching point before we hit new highs with Ethereum, what's it saying key levels to watch are? I love looking at gaps. So it got a gap here at 3,000. I have another gap up here around 3,500. Those are going to be my two zones to the upside once I get this correction here. Buy in here around 22.6. Probably look at some profit on trades around 3,000, around 3,500. But for the rest of you who aren't traders, if you're just saying, Tim, what about Ethereum long term?
Yeah.
I think we're ready to explode. I think this is one. I did a price prediction video a couple weeks ago. I think very low end, the very disappointing institutions are not involved. We're talking about 5,000, 5,300. I think on the high end, 13, 15,000 range is still on the table for Ethereum. I'm not predicting end of 2025. Again, I think we extend into 2026. So be patient on that one. Take profit early if you need to, but I will not be surprised if in 2026 we see a 13,000 or higher Ethereum.
If you like this video, make sure and like and subscribe to the channel and check out the next video right here.